All right. Good afternoon, all. Welcome to the February 2026 Kansas Soil Health Partnership Forum. My name is Jennifer Similink. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Soil Health Alliance, your host for the forum. Thanks for joining us today. As a reminder, a recording of today's forum and all previous forums are housed on the Kansas Soil Health Alliance's website, as well as on our YouTube page. Links to the recordings will also be provided on the Kansas Soil Health Alliance's social media pages on Facebook and X, and also in our newsletter. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can go to our website, and at the very bottom banner, there's an opportunity to sign up for our newsletter. To start off today's forum, I'm going to put on a quick 2-question survey for everyone to complete. This will just help us understand the dynamics of our audience today. All right, if you could take a quick second to complete those 2 questions, we would appreciate it. All right, I want to thank everyone for completing that. Again, it looks like we have a majority of farmers and ranchers joining us today, and then a mix of some educators and some agency professionals, as well as non-governmental organization representatives. And this time we're split pretty equally between Kansas residents and those who are out of state. So thank you everyone for taking a minute to do that. We will get moving into our presentation in just a moment. I want to remind everyone that you are muted during the presentation. If you have a question, you can look at the toolbar at the bottom and select raise your hand, or you can drop a question in the Q&A function. We will work with our speaker if we're going to answer those questions throughout the presentation or hold until the end. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Joanna Johnson, the Outreach and Education Coordinator for the Kansas Soil Health Alliance, to introduce today's presenter.
Okay, so today we have Ryan Flickner. He serves as the Senior Director of Advocacy for Kansas Farm Bureau. He came to Farm Bureau in 2013 after spending more than 6 years on the staff of U.S. Senator Pat Roberts, 5 of which were spent in Washington, D.C., working on agriculture and related policy issues. Ryan is a native Kansan, born in Abilene. He graduated from Mays High School and attended K-State, where he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in agronomy and natural resources. While at K-State, he was elected by his peers as K-State ambassador, interned for USDA's White House Liaison Office in Washington, D.C., as well as the USDA NRCS Field Office in Republic County, Kansas. He is the 6th generation to be actively engaged in the Flickner Innovation Farm, a family farming business near Moundridge, Kansas, which has been in the family since 1874. Ryan, his wife Laura, and their sons Owen and Miles live in Manhattan. In his free time, Ryan enjoys spending time with his family, as well as participating in snow and water sports, including scuba. And with that, Ryan, we'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Joanna. Appreciate the opportunity to join. I am going to pull the PowerPoint up, and if you can confirm that it's showing appropriately, I would appreciate that.
Yes, we see it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and I guess as they say, long-time listener, first-time caller, appreciate the opportunity to join you. Really appreciate what the Kansas Soil Health Alliance does. Great staff, great board, doing some really dynamic things, and the bio kind of speaks for itself. But one thing that wasn't referenced is I was actually on the soils judging team during my time at Kansas State University. So have a great appreciation for all things soil and soil health. And I think this is very appropriate. We're a week early doing this today, but excited about the National Soil Health Week next week. So look forward to seeing all the documents and the celebration that ensues. So Flickner Innovation Farm. I could probably give an entire hour debrief on how we came up with this and what it stands for. But as I look back, the Flickners, we came over. My forefathers and foremothers came over from present-day Ukraine on 3 separate boats in 1874. Anabaptist background, so they were fleeing for religious reasons and some other issues, but got a lot of cool, fun family history. There's actually a historical monument that is really close to where we farm, and they honor some of that heritage and the background. And the reason why I like teeing that off is because I think any of us involved in production agriculture, we do stand on the shoulders of giants, and we have a lot to be thankful for. And this picture, I think, kind of sums it up well. Things look a little bit different in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And yes, the Flickner Innovation Farm, I think we officially branded that in about 2019. But I would argue that the Flickners have been very innovative since they did, settle here in central Kansas in the Moundridge, greater Moundridge area. But this is kind of a fun picture for me, and hopefully the highlighter shows up. Nice fur coat here. So certainly, somebody was wearing their Sunday finest. And then I've got, I think the bio mentioned, I've got 2 young boys. My second born, I think this is probably kind of his alter ego up here on the pitch of the roof, kind of all by himself being Mr. Daredevil. But I think as we look across this, you can certainly see that they were pretty proud of a tree that they planted kind of around. But if you look at the horizon, not too many trees. And why do I kind of tee it off with that background is I think when we talk about soil health and natural resource management, things are a lot different today in 2026 than they were when we settled in 1874 or the dirty 30s of 1930s and so on and so forth. And this historical marker is just off the Elyria exit for anybody that's traveled Interstate 135 south of the city of McPherson, but north of the city of Moundridge. It's a historical document and monument that really does honor Lone Tree. And there is a Lone Tree Township in McPherson County. But long story short is whether it was prairie fires, whether it was lightning strikes, the Native Americans, fire was very common to the landscape in our tall grass to mixed grass prairie there in McPherson County. And this lone tree, this lone cottonwood tree, largely survived because it was on an island in a tributary and in a stream and avoided the fires. But it was also a historical marker for individuals that were traversing on the Santa Fe Trail. So today, if you look at that marker that I just highlighted on the previous slide, but you look at the background, the landscape is very, very different. And if we go out even a little bit bigger, here's where the interstate exits would be. Here's where that historical marker is. But the Google Earth image does show a lot of tree growth that has come in the last 150 years. And I throw that out there largely because we needed to put trees up in the 30s and shelter belts and windbreaks, but we've also taken fire off of the landscape. And I would argue that, yes, we had the dirty 30s, but if it were not for the moldboard plow and the John Deere plow, my forefathers and foremothers, they would not have been productive farming on this topsoil here in McPherson County. So like to honor some of the heritage and talk a little bit about the history where we've come from, but also talk about the innovation that has taken place over those years. These are some fun slides. Over here on the left side, December 1955, the year my father was born. He's the 5th generation on the farm. I'm the 6th, and good Lord willing, I've got a couple of young boys that may want to be the 7th. But we, the Flickners, were the first in the entire township within Mound Township to put in an irrigation water right. We do farm around a couple of vested water rights, and I'll get into some Kansas water law here in a little bit. We do farm around a couple of vested water rights that pertain to the city of Moundridge's municipal water supply. But again, being innovative, this is a very senior water right, even within in the township, let alone the state of Kansas. And to have that picture that was documented of when they were drilling that well is very near and dear. Similarly, I don't know how many of the producers out there have the old ASCS soils map and soil classification and some various uses, but this does come from the 1946 McPherson County Soil Conservation District. And that is the home place, that home quarter plus an adjacent 80 have been in the family going back to that 1874 when we did immigrate from modern day Ukraine. So again, we move through and really talk about some of the history, and we're very blessed with abundant natural resources. But I also like to talk about we cannot manage what we don't monitor. So the next few slides here, I really want to talk through and walk through some background and some context on ways we are doing various monitoring of our natural resources. And I probably neglected and teeing this off. If there are any questions as I go along, I try not to use too many acronyms. But sometimes as a former or recovering government employee and somebody that still works on farm policy acronyms, don't die very easily. So if I say something that doesn't make sense or use an acronym, please raise your hand or put it in the Q&A, and I am absolutely happy to answer questions as we go along here. But again, the home quarter plus the 80 right here. Here's the homestead that goes back to the 1800s. That water right drill that I showed earlier, it is water right number 4,537 from 1955. It's right here. We do own another very senior water right. But as you can see that we have added some additional water rights in 77. Our most recent addition would be 2010 here. But I also referenced that we do farm around about 4 of the city of Moundridge's municipal water supply. So not only is water quality, but water quantity are very, very important. Another fun thing, and I think the poll at the beginning was super helpful. About 50% of the attendance today is from Kansas, and then the other 50% are from other states. We have a very robust water policy and regulatory scheme here in the state of Kansas. And one of the things that our local groundwater management district, in conjunction with the Division of Water Resources, they go out and measure quite a few static water levels annually. They typically try to do that the first week of January, and really kind of smack dab between the couple of different areas and regions that we do farm. There is a hydrograph or a well, an irrigation well that has been monitored going back to 1970. And as you can see, early 70s through current, that we have lost some saturated thickness within the aquifer. If you do the math on this, we consume or use about 1/3 of a foot of our saturated thickness annually. Certainly when you talk about the 1980s drought, more recently the 11 and 12 drought, or even the 2020 through 2024, we did use and we pulled the aquifer much harder. I don't know if it's a rebound per se, but you do see some recovery in some of those more moisture-prone years in 2019 and more recently in 2025. But when we're farming in an area in central Kansas and McPherson County, we have a lot of geospatial issues. We have a lot of temporal issues that we do get to deal with. So certainly from a Kansas-centric standpoint, those of us that the state is near and dear to our hearts, why we often get told Kansas is flat, we know it is not. So we do have a considerable amount of topography change throughout our operation, sometimes in excess of 25 feet. Fun history here too. If you look at the topo map, there are 2 different sand pits that show up. We believe this more southeastern one, it was actually quarried with a horse and slip back in the very early 1900s. And then the one here further west and a little bit further north, we understand that was quarried with a steam shovel to build what was then US 81 before Interstate 135 came along. So when we talk about sand pits, you can see this blue line stream here. It actually is named Sand Creek. So, we would be told that would be a sandy substrate, and there is some very large sand and gravel formations that are below the surface. So we're dealing with some of that. I mentioned the creek and the slough. We've got a number of different waterways that meander through the operation. Mentioned earlier, we do farm around 4 municipal wells. So again, water quality becomes a major component of what we're trying to manage and be a good citizen for our local community. And then I referenced the declining aquifer. So another hydrograph from a similar irrigation well that would be approximately 2 miles south of us. I did mention the sand, but also in light of next week being the National Soil Health Week, we farm predominantly on a crete silt loam soil. So great soil. But when you get down to that 40 to 50 centimeter mark, we are pushing in some areas the high 40s to right around 50% clay content. So while we do have sand that we have to manage and the water holding capacity within a sand or gravel is typically much lighter, we do have some infiltration challenges when we're dealing with this crete silt loam. When it comes down to it, whether it's the toad strangler rainfall event or even with our irrigation events, we really are only able to infiltrate about 1 inch to maybe 1.5 inches of water per hour. So we've got to be very good stewards and very intentional with our irrigation management to deal with this particular soil classification. Again, we cannot manage what we don't measure. So this is a fun thing that I just kind of learned about within the last couple of years, and it's certainly open to the general public. Anybody can get on the etdata.org website. It is Open ET, or Open Evapotranspiration. And this is a project that largely was driven by NASA. And they have taken their satellite imagery and really put some computer modeling to it. Not that it's perfect, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do on the innovation farm is really hone in some of the various ET levels that may be pulled from a satellite versus something that's actually in the ground. But I boxed off some of our different fields that we do farm and we operate. And over here, this was from 2024. It was a very droughty year for us in McPherson County. This far western square, it is a dry land 40-acre patch, and that is one of the only or very limited dry land patches we have. We are predominantly an irrigated operation. So I took the natural rainfall that we did have, which was about 6 inches during the primary growing season, and I calculated what I call a water duty. How many bushels of production did we have per inch of either irrigation or inch of natural rainfall? Mentioned that 2024 was a fairly droughty year. So the Open ET's claims on a pure dry land, we had approximately 29 inches of ET off of I don't know why it says winter wheat. This was actually a corn crop. But if we calculate that, we had about 20 or 50 bushels of production on 6 inches of natural rainfall. So our water duty was approximately 6 bushels per inch of rain. And then we go right across the road where we've owned and operated for a number of years. This would be a subsurface drip irrigated field where the ET is a little bit higher there. But again, that would have been a corn crop as well. We were actually able to produce approximately 23 bushels per inch of irrigation. And when I've talked to my friends in the land grant community and are the water engineers, when you start getting over 15 to 16 bushels of production per inch of irrigation, you're doing pretty well. So we do really try to be very intentional when we manage our natural resources. And we'll talk about it a little bit later on some of the different types. But when we've asked Division of Water Resources, we're using approximately 60% of the McPherson County average on our operation. So whether that's a true 40% conservation factor or not, that is really our goal, is to produce as much as we possibly can using as few inputs, including irrigation, as we possibly can. I did put some question marks on a couple of the tracks here. We do not farm those, so I do not know what the production history on those fields are. I do know they are irrigated. But if you look at the Open ET and this particular one, it was over 40 inches of evapotranspiration, again, on a corn crop. So I like to, not necessarily go into the coffee shop and brag about yields. I want to be profitable, and I want my return on investment to be as high as it possibly can. The other fun thing that we've used is the Kansas Geological Survey, which is housed at the University of Kansas in Lawrence. They run a program and they have an individual over there named Brownie Wilson that will do a Q stable, meaning if we want to be sustainable with our aquifer, what is the maximum amount of pumpage from the aquifer that could be done in the local neighborhood? So yes, there is a 5 mile radius and a 3 mile radius. I think the important thing to really understand is what is average versus what is a drought year versus a wet year. And again, going back to using approximately 60% of the county average with that 40% conservation factor, if we can get some others in the neighborhood to cut back as well, and this is not just agriculture. This includes municipals, this includes recreation, industrial. But in our local neighborhood, if we could get to that kind of average reduction of between 10 and 12% reduction, we do believe our aquifer would be much more sustainable than it currently is. I've mentioned a couple of times the water quality. Over here on the right-hand side, this is provided by the city of Moundridge. So they have to meet water quality standards with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, as well as the EPA. On the left side, these are various water samples that we've taken at all of our irrigation water rights. And one of the goals was to really see what happens with water quality throughout the pumping season. So you'll notice we took some samples early in the pumping season, mid in the pumping season, late in the pumping season. But I think the interesting thing to talk about here is when we talk municipal wells, the nitrate level, the maximum amount of nitrates that are allowed from EPA in a potable water system, a municipal water system, public water system is 10 parts per million. So you can see we've got some exceedances on the municipal. We've also got one of our irrigation wells that is really high in the nitrates. We have been working with various research institutions to figure out what is going on, and happy to answer any questions that may come about this. But I think this is really important context as we talk about management styles and learning to be good stewards of the resource. Because we know as a farmer, as a rancher, if we're applying manure, if we're applying synthetic fertilizers, oftentimes those fertilizers will either run off the soil and enter a surface water body, or under the right conditions and certain parameters, they will actually infiltrate in and through the soil profile and end up in the groundwater. So going back to that 2018, 2019 timeframe, we did install 2 different paired watersheds. They're approximately 1 acre each. And the long-term goal, I mentioned we were in a pretty droughty period from 2020 through 2024. So we're still under the baseline background collection efforts. But these pictures were taken last year in 2025. When we are blessed with natural rainfall and runoff, that 1 acre does go through essentially terrace beams, and it comes through these paired watersheds. As the water comes through, there's a pump that gets pumped into a glass water collector here, and then I take those off to the lab to have the lab analyze it. And long term, what we want to do is one side of the paired watershed will be our control, where we do the standard operating procedure, best farming practice, whatever it may be, and immediately adjacent to it on the other side is where we would have our variable, whether that's applying atrazine, whether that's reducing the fertilizer, the synthetic nitrogen rate by 50%, whether that's putting a biological out there. This really opens up the window to do a lot of really interesting research, but we've got to collect and analyze what the native and natural background elements are before we get to this. But with the 4 paired watersheds, our goal is to be in a corn soybean rotation. So every single year we would have baseline and a variable on a corn field. And then within the same quarter section adjacent to that, we would have the same thing on a soybean field. And that I'll get to a couple slides here as well. That could include cover crops, that it could include wheat as the first primary crop, and then a double crop of soybean. We're really excited about what the possibilities and the opportunities are here. So this is predominantly surface water runoff and water quality. But again, we know that under infiltration or various events that some of those nutrients in particular will move through the soil profile. So we've teamed up with the Kansas Geological Survey, and they came out and did this direct push. So here's the machine, essentially just a boring machine. They were able to go down to about 100 feet on this particular site. What this is really telling us is various stratification layers within the soil profile. So mentioned really, up top, we do have that crete silt loam down at 50 centimeters. It does have a higher clay content, and then it could possibly drop off and get a little bit more sand or gravelly, more porous. And then we move deeper in the profile, and we have more clay restrictive layers. That's what the further right the lines are would be the more restrictive, or the harder to penetrate through those layers will be, versus the lines on the far left. That would be a sand or a gravel area that is relatively easy to penetrate through. So pretty good sand and gravel here, and this is really close to one of our better producing irrigation wells. So when we get down to that 60 to 100 feet deep, you can see that there is quite a water-bearing formation in this particular site. So again, just being good stewards, managing, knowing what our soil is, what our infiltration rate is, and how various things move through the soil was one of the goals and objectives of this background research. Next few slides, I'd like to just walk through, and again, please ask Q&A. Jennifer and Joanna, I haven't seen anything pop up on my screen, but I guess I'm in presentation mode, so that may be disabled. So if there is a question, please just interrupt, and happy to answer it. But the next few slides, I'd like to just walk through what we're actually doing today on the farm as managers. And these are various types of irrigation that we use today. So we've got a couple of different 360 rains. We've got over 600 acres of subsurface drip, and you can see this is on a turn row. We've got some compaction, which is, I think, one of the reasons why the water is bubbling up to the surface there on that soybean field. I don't like this picture, but I think it does tell a pretty good story, and the context and the background on that is 2019 was a very wet year for us. We actually had a terrace that overtopped and breached. And again, you can see some pretty good topsoil horizon here with the darker brown and the black soil. But when you get under that, getting into that Sand Creek area, it's certainly a very sandy substrate. But these would be those subsurface drip, or SDI lines, that are spread out at approximately 60 inches. And they were installed approximately 16 to 18 inches when we installed that. And that's where the erosion is, as that terrace breach. So it really does expose what the subsurface drip is. I laid out all sorts of aluminum gated irrigation pipe growing up. 8-inch, 6-inch was what we mainly used. We have converted a few years ago away from that, and don't even use the poly pipe anymore. This would be precision mobile drip irrigation. So essentially the same thing that is plowed underneath the soil profile. It's just been retrofitted to a center pivot irrigation. And then, yes, we are in that Sand Creek. So when we get to the 2019s and the 2025s, we do have some natural flooding events that occur. I think one of the reasons why we're able to reduce our water consumption and use that 60% of the county average goes back to the large acreage that we have, over 600, almost 650 acres of subsurface drip irrigation. Again, that is installed approximately 16 to 18 inches below the soil surface. So you can see that it will rise to the top after a number of irrigation events, but you can also see, really in the heat of summer, this probably was taken in July, we still have very large cracks on the soil surface. And one of the right ways that we do manage all of our irrigation events is we try to be good stewards, and we'd like to look at the forward forecast. Not that they're always right, but if it looks like we have a pretty high possibility of a rainfall event, especially in that 1/2 inch to an inch, we'll hold off on various irrigation activity, because we do want the top 4 to 6 inches to be relatively dry. So when the natural rainfall does come, it will infiltrate. We do have a center pivot. We've got the 360s. When you're naturally applying or artificially applying water, groundwater, surface water, irrigation water to the surface, and that surface is already wet, typically what we know, going back to managing our soil, once the profile is full, if you are blessed with a natural rainfall event, more often than not, it does run off and you get very little infiltration benefit. So the subsurface drip does allow us to really manage that surface. Here's a video of installing subsurface drip. We are predominantly a no-till to minimum till, strip till operation. So we like to do some strip tills before we plant corn. But once the corn has been harvested, we will come back and no-till drill wheat directly into our corn stalks. And then once the wheat is harvested, sometimes the same day, the same field, we will go back and no-till double crop soybeans into our wheat stubble. So tillage is not really tools that we have, but obviously to put subsurface drip into the ground, you do have to essentially deep rip it. So some of our subsurface drip has been installed going back to 2001. We're now 25 years into operating that kind of system. We don't like compaction. We don't like heavy pieces of equipment traversing our fields, largely because it will compact not only the soil, but it does do some damage and limits the opportunity for the subsurface drip to irrigate efficiently. Once that tape has been installed, that subsurface drip, I call it tape, that goes actually through the field laterally. They do come in and trench the main line or the pressure line and the flush line at either end, and then they connect a gooseneck from that main line into each individual SDI lines that run through the field. So you can kind of see it. We've dug lots of holes. There are leaks. There are rodent issues. There's other management challenges that do come with this type of irrigation. But I think that does provide just a general background and context of what SDI is. Similarly, I mentioned on that previous picture, here is a precision mobile drip irrigation, or PMDI. Essentially the same concept of the dripper lines that would be buried underneath get attached to a flexible hose that is attached to the center pivot. And where the subsurface drip, we have one single main filter to protect the emitters from getting plugged. As you run through a center pivot, that is a 1/4 mile in our case. That's a 1/4 mile piece of galvanized pipe that does rust and it does flake off. So each one of the drops that come off of the center pivot, we have put an individual filter in before it goes into the T to go to the Precision Mobile. So I've got a couple of different videos here that show PMDI in action. You can see fairly large water droplets that do come down from that. A lot of questions on this. Well, will it knock the corn crop over? And soybeans, are you pulling pods off? We've had great luck with this. We've not pulled pods off the soybeans. We've not had issues with the corn. You know, when it gets to certainly later in the growing season, it's pretty straight upright and not very pliable. But we also know just the physicality of corn. It likes to have V leaves. So what we've noticed with the Precision Mobile drip is those water droplets do collect in the V of the leaf of the corn crop. And just like you would see on a dewy morning in a corn crop, it does put all that water right there at the crown and the brace roots of the corn crop. So been pretty pleased with our Precision Mobile drip and think it's a great opportunity to continue to pursue efficiency on center pivot irrigation. Now, the latest technology that we actually have, we were the first ones in the state of Kansas to purchase and put into production a 360 rain unit. We now have 2 of these. These are manufactured out of the Precision 360 company over in Morton, Illinois. And our particular unit is a 60-foot boom. So we are able to marry that up with our 24-row planter. I think they're happy to jump into any questions that this particular unit or kind of irrigation adaptation may bring. I think this has a lot of great tools and opens a lot of possibility when we talk about effluent management. If you need to dewater a lagoon on a swine or a dairy facility, this may give you an opportunity to use that effluent beneficially throughout the growing season. Whereas if you have to knife it in or put it on the soil, you're largely doing that outside of the growing season, and then you have the winter freeze-thaw limitations as well. One thing on a 360 irrigation unit is you're somewhat limited from water capacity. So You get much below 125 to 130 gallons per minute. I don't know how efficient it would be at irrigating, but also when we talk about the inside diameter of the hose that water travels through on this is 3 inches. So there is a tremendous amount of friction loss. So when we're talking about that, we can really only push about 200 to 220 gallons per minute through the actual unit. So if you've got an irrigation well that produces higher than that, you're largely going to have to siphon off some of the water, or I've heard various other operators do purchase 2 of these 360 rains to operate in the same system so that then they can theoretically get to 400 or so gallons per minute. So I mentioned it is an energy hog going through 3,000 foot of hose at that the 3-inch diameter. We do have a 30 horsepower booster pump that comes out of our well or after our wells, gets pressurized, and then goes through the line that is in the belly of this unit. 60-foot boom. The way that this operates is going down a tram line or an AB line. The outside 15 feet on either side would water as the machine goes outbound. So 30 feet total. And then when it reaches the end of that tram line or the outbound segment, this unit will actually stop and go into reverse. And when it reverses the middle 30 feet, so there's actually 4 drops in the front of the unit, you can see here, plus 1 on either side. So the middle 30 feet would irrigate as this particular unit reverses. And the objective of that is to keep the 3 drive tires dry at all times. We do have to have a special add-on to the planter so that this unit knows how to carry over terraces, where it's at in the field. One unique thing about a 360 rain is whatever you're able to plant, you can actually run this unit over and irrigate. So if you've got oxbows, if you've got a homestead on a quarter where a pivot would not be able to water part of that, if you've got pivot corners, etc., this concept really does allow you to irrigate every tillable acre that you're able to plant. Here's just some other interesting things and a couple of hypotheses that I have. Really excited about the 360 opportunity when it does pertain to adding new tools, so to speak, to the toolbox. For example, on the 360, on the subsurface drip irrigation, we get really nervous about putting various nutrients through that operation or that system. We do a lot of liquid UAN, so 32 and 28. That seems to work really well to split apply and actually micro fertigate. But when we start getting into the P and the K, a little more nervous about pushing that through a subsurface drip just because of the opportunity for it to precipitate out and plug up the emitters. With this, I think as long as it's in a slurry or a liquid form, I'm able to actually push this through, going back to kind of using that effluent model, so to speak. And I know one of the things that the 360 team is actually studying right now, I've had many conversations with them, is they are designing a dry hopper system that would essentially get plugged in somewhere here where the booster is before it goes into the main line going out to the machine. But the dry hopper, if I wanted to make a slurry out of dry urea, or what I'm really excited about is, am I actually able to put in a cover crop and almost interseed as this unit goes through the irrigation process? That may open up a whole nother soil health and even a grazing potential with this particular technology. This particular 360 is actually located on this field. And when we talk about specific management of various nutrients and collecting runoff and variable speed irrigation, we got a lot of topography changes, but we also have some pretty major terrace and waterway issues. So I want to variable apply my water and my nutrients. So theoretically, based off this model, if I'm in a terrace channel, I'll speed the unit up so it doesn't overwater and it doesn't collect water and potentially get stuck, versus some of the areas that may be higher in the topography. I'm able to slow that unit down so I can actually infiltrate some of the water a little bit more intentionally. We do have a lot of soil variability. So again, when we talk about management, I've got a lot of sand and gravel, but then I do have that good crete silt loam that has a fair amount of water holding capacity as we look through the field. Again, I think this may be the third or fourth time I've said it. We cannot manage what we don't monitor. So we come back to putting all sorts of sensors and tools on different pieces of equipment. This was one of our pivots, and we noticed that we were losing pressure at various times throughout the day. Counter that to what we learned a year later when we kept the pressure more the same. We had a pumping plant issue, and without having these kind of tools and technology available, we would not have known we were up at 15 to 25 psi, and within about an hour we were dropping down to zero. That really harmed our water application tools. So we do use a number of plant-based tools. We obviously have moisture probes with the ground-based moisture and monitoring, and we do use a lot of satellite, fixed wing, and even drone aerial imagery. And as you can see, again, this was 2019, so a relatively wet year, but what's publicly available through R7 or even climate, you can't really tell much. When we finally get into a fixed wing, we can definitely tell where the pivot tracks are versus we actually had an on-site robot or drone robot that was there and making daily flights where we can really see a couple of drowned out spots. We can see an old waterway that we relocated, as well as some other issues that were showing up in the field. Here is that FIAT tool that I mentioned earlier. It basically is a plant caliper, measures the diameter of that plant throughout the stress of the day. And then when it actually relaxes and respirates at night, you'll see it grow as long as we do get a relatively cool night overnight. It just allows us to know when various irrigation events are happening. And then I mentioned the drawdown or the shrinking of the corn crop during the heat of the day, where it does relax and respire at night, it tends to grow. But as you can see over a growing season, it does do what corn does and puts the energy and the photosynthesis into plant reproduction and corn kernels on the cob. Similar, the AquaSpy and the probes that we've used at various irrigation events, you can see where we do get natural rainfall versus an irrigation. One thing that I had to learn is essentially from the subsurface drip irrigation is turn off that 4 and 8 inch soil monitoring levels. Because again, I wasn't artificially raining or bringing water in from the surface. I was intentionally trying to put water at the 20 inch, the 16 to 20 inch mark. But I also didn't want to over apply and start pushing water or nutrients through the base or the bottom of the profile. So if I started seeing big spikes in the 48 inch, I knew I was probably overwatering. We do have an autonomous pivot, which is a ground penetrating radar. As the pivot goes around and around, it does take various reports from each slice of that pie and then reports back where we're deficient or where our water holding capacity may be light versus where it may be saturated. So again, making management decisions as we go through the growing season. Last year and again this year, moving a little bit away maybe from the irrigation side of things, but again, being good stewards of the natural resources, knowing that fertilizer prices are very high as all input prices are, again here in 2026, we wanted to do a trial with our local John Deere dealership, Prairie Land Partners, based out of McPherson, and try to figure out what the economic return on their exact shot planter is. And really the concept here is rather than 2x2 or dribbling on top a constant stream of fertilizer, can we use the technology that's available and just shoot or place fertilizer in at planting in between the corn seeds? And ultimately what we did find on our 1034 application when it was just streamed on, we were putting approximately 6 gallons per acre on, versus when we used the exact shot, we were only putting 1.5 gallons per acre on. So certainly a cost savings when it comes to using that type of technology and management. A couple other things that we're really excited about and have trialed with John Deere over the years is we're all familiar with yield monitors, but the concept came out a couple of years ago is John Deere not only can do the yield monitor, they can do a protein monitor. So Kansas centric, we know that if you deliver it to the right location, there is a benefit or an additional premium for high protein wheat most years. But again, until you kind of get the yield monitor after the fact, or if you're asking the local elevator or delivery spot for the protein levels every single delivery, you don't really know how your protein levels change throughout a field. So this is one of the interesting tools. You can kind of see on this 80-acre tract between the yield and certainly on the protein, it looks like historically the field had been managed differently, because there are certainly a higher level of protein in one part of the field than the other. Another fun technology and tool that we've kind of used over the years is greenfield robotics. These are the robotic weeders. I've got a video of it actually going through a soybean field here. Kind of an interesting technology and concept as we talk about crop protection tools and chemicals. And I think one thing that this particular product will excel on is the grain sorghum side of the world, because there are just so few crop protection tools you can actually use once the sorghum crop has emerged and is certainly doing its growth throughout the year. So that's another technology that we've had. Mentioned soil health, and this is one of the concepts that we continue to push. One of the reasons that I like all the great work that the Kansas Soil Health Alliance is doing. We have a neighbor that has a native pasture adjacent to one of our fields, and within a quarter mile, we've got a subsurface drip irrigated field. And as we look at the organic matter, then that 0 to 4 inch range, we know that the native pasture actually has a higher organic matter. I think that would be what most research and most hypotheses would tell you. What was interesting is when we did this, we got down to the 12 inch and for sure the 26, we actually had higher organic matters over in our subsurface drip irrigated crop rotation field. So one of the things that we're still trying to fine tune and figure out why that is what it is. Cover crop. I'm not the expert. I'm sure there's a lot of folks here that are much more knowledgeable on this, but we have experimented with cover crop. And I think the interesting thing, this is a soybean field planted, same planter, same day, same row. This had a cover crop. This portion of the field didn't, but you can see very distinctly where the soil, or where the cover crop boundary was. So every year with cover crops, it is vastly different. 24, drought year. What had cover crop on corn was definitely about a week or two later emerged than what didn't have a cover crop. The interesting tidbit about this little portion right here, this is where I picked up the 15-foot drill and turned around. So while there was cover crop everywhere else, this was a little gap that did not have cover crop. You can see it came up approximately the same time that the strip that did not have cover crop did over there. The final couple slides I'd like to highlight here are something that I'm really excited about in the future, and happy to answer any questions. And I think Jennifer and Joanna may even have my dad talk a little bit more about this. He's actually down at Commodity Classic today presenting on the NASA FIAT, or the Farm Innovation Ambassador team. I came up with the tagline, or kind of the KISS principle to me, is bringing NASA down to earth. We know there's a tremendous amount of satellites and tools that collect data every single day, whether it's publicly available, whether there's a commercial use to it or not. That's what we're trying to figure out. But NASA did create NASA Acres and NASA Earth. One of the things that they are trying to do with the NASA FIAT program is to unite farmers with really world-class engineers and researchers to figure out what the needs of the farming and the ranching community is, and marry that up with a technical expert and a researcher to demonstrate. So the question I have for all of you is, where do you fit in? Are you a producer, an agribusiness partner, maybe a student that wants to get involved in agriculture but doesn't know how to, or they might not have a home farm or a ranch to go back to? I think this is a great opportunity, even in the educational space, to get a lot more interest in production agriculture. And again, just some goals and objectives. We do want to be, or the FIAT group wants to be, the bridge to overcome the disconnect between farmers and researchers. I go back to what I highlighted earlier on that protein side. NASA has told us that using the imagery that they have available and that's publicly available, they will be able to tell me within that 80-acre field, if you segregate rather than commingle and go harvest the back or the west 20 acres, that's your high protein wheat. Sell that into a channel that will pay you the premium for it, versus the other 60 acres or whatever the remaining portion of the field is. That is your more standard protein levels, and therefore just enter it in the normal commerce channels. So if I know that from a satellite imagery ahead of time, I'm much more intentional when I send a combine out to the field to segregate rather than commingle some of the value added products I think our grain inventories may be moving to in the future. The final slide I have here is really excited to team up with K-State, the ID3A group, as well as Kansas 4-H. We are going to host an Ag Tech Day on April 4th at the farm to really kind of showcase the number of various technologies that we're using on the farm, whether it's machine learning, whether it's AI, whether it's the NASA group, really to hone in some of the different research that's taking and continue to get the youth excited about what the future of agriculture has. So with that, I will stop doing the screen share unless Jennifer and Joanna want me to leave something up. And I am happy to answer any questions that may have come up in the Q&A or elsewhere.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Ryan. My head is swimming a little bit with all the information provided to us and all that um, just your farm has had the opportunity to be involved in and get to see. So we did have a question, particularly about the FIAT program, but I think I got it answered. I found the website
Okay.
for it to provide some more information. And yes, we do. Joanna, you might pop on and confirm that we think we do have your dad lined up to get more in depth on that piece on a later forum sometime this year. So we'll be
I
following up more.
I don't have a specific date, but yes, he said after, let's see, there's a meeting in July, and so he with all the to talk about the project, and so he said he would have some more details then. And so sometime after July, so we're thinking August or September. So we just need to get the specific date nailed down. So
Wonderful. If anyone on here is familiar with, well, Ryan, but Ray then as well, Ray doesn't stay home well. Um, it creates challenges if you're trying to meet with him or work around his schedule, which is fantastic. He gets a great opportunity to travel and experience lots of things and bring that broad viewpoint back to us. But if there weren't, I don't see hands up and much else in the chat, but I have a couple questions or thoughts. So I'm up in Jewel, Kansas, or Jewel County, Kansas. Our farm is fully dry land. There's some irrigation on the eastern part of the county, but none for us. So I am not familiar with a lot of irrigation technology. So I will do my best. If I miscommunicate anything, feel free to correct me. But when talking about the Q stable, you were stating that just a 10 to 12% decrease across your county or your region could help meet that.
Yeah, great question. And the great thing that Brownie Wilson does, he's with KGS out of KU. He will figure out where the particular, because Q stable really is spatial dependent. So
Mhm.
the slide that I showed here had a Q stable for a 3 mile and a 5 mile radius from essentially the center of our operation. So the Q stable will be different everywhere you go. Obviously, the challenges over the True Ogallala may be different than the challenges over the Big Bend Prairie and Stafford County, which are going to be different than what we have in the Equus beds in GMD2. GMD2, Groundwater Management District Number 2, it's housed out of Halstead, but its territory covers parts or all of Sedgwick, Harvey, Reno, and McPherson. And without question, the McPherson County region or territory within GMD2 probably has the largest challenges when it comes to overdraft or just not having enough water to go around with what the state has already allocated. So we're where we are based in McPherson County. We're only a mile or two into the southern part of the county. You go up to the city of McPherson and some of the other areas, they probably will have to have a much greater than a 12% reduction. But yes, for our particular essentially intersection of Arrowhead and 19th Avenue, 3 miles west of the city of Moundridge, it would take approximately a 10 to 12% reduction. Again, on average, whatever average normal in Kansas is anymore, but that 10 to 12% reduction from our local 3 or 5 mile radius to get into sustainability.
So with that and knowing, yeah, that can vary then depending on where it's measured, but you've had an opportunity to try so many different of these irrigation technologies. Of course, for us and as you've alluded to and mentioned, we'd love to see this, paired with management practices. But in addition to that, I mean, there's management practices to irrigation and where technology can help, either start to move that needle or take it a little further. So of all of these different irrigation practices you've had, which do you think, as we're looking at the bigger picture, I know you can put on like your Farm Bureau lens, as we're trying to talk water in Kansas, which ones do you feel have that opportunity if they can be added onto more farms that we can use that technology piece and then marry that with, our other soil management pieces to start to make some progress?
I'll try not to filibuster, but I think, Jennifer, to best answer that is I'm technology agnostic, and if I had more time, I'd love to even dive deeper into this. But my running joke is across our 12 different water rights, that the way I explain it is we love all of our children equally. But we always remember our favorite grandparent, whether they were the ones that took us out for ice cream or the movies or just spent extra time with us. So the way I've tried to marry up the technology or the delivery tool of irrigation really is dependent on the water producing capacity of the groundwater well. So if I've got a marginal well, I'm probably going to have to either go subsurface drip or the 360. As I've told a lot of folks, and if you're in Western Kansas and you have a quarter section and a groundwater well that produces 600 or 800 gallons, I think a pivot is a no-brainer for you because you can just make it go round and round. When you start getting down to the 400 gallons a minute, 300, 200, you got some challenges and you got some management decisions you're going to have to make. So I think hopefully it came through clear. I really like subsurface drip because again, we're irrigating 16 to 18 inches below the soil surface. And if I manage it correctly, we're in a part of the state where we get 32, 33 inches on average of natural precipitation. Typically, I'm blessed with a couple of rainfall events in the middle of the growing season in July and August. So I'm not, Western Kansas and having to pre-water and water a crop up. With subsurface drip, I really can't water my crop up. So I really like the quote unquote conservation ability of the subsurface drip to capture and keep that top 4 to 8 inches of the profile dry, so to speak. But I think I also mentioned with the 360 rain, if this opens up a whole nother possibility for me to interseed a cover crop, then I can all of a sudden start doing some additional soil health practices, maybe seeing if I can push my organic matter, if I want to invite livestock to the operation. Having that interseeded cover crop, putting it in late July or at some point during August, that gets me a much faster head start than otherwise I have to hire a drone or harvest the corn, come back with the drill. Then oftentimes I'm kind of behind the 8 ball on getting biomass and even potentially grazing capacity.
No, absolutely. So you did well on not sidestepping, but addressing that. Do you know? So one of the things that we're always trying to work on as well is connect growers with quality resources. Is there a resource that breaks down a lot of these different pieces? Because as you just said, I mean, it's like everything we talk about here, that context really matters. That is, hey, if you're in this environment or you have this well, or your fields are laid out like this could be, a good method. Do you know if any of those exist?
Great question. And I think that's largely why mom and dad, and I guess a little bit of me, why we dreamed this up, because
Mm-hmm.
we knew we had some innovative technologies. We're willing to to try some new concepts for the betterment of society, quite frankly. Ultimately, it comes down to productivity and return on investment for us. We want to be profitable, but we also know we have a declining aquifer. We know we've got water quality concerns. We've got soil health. We've got crop protection tools, fertility, etc. So the concept that we've always said is, hey, we've got the land base, we've got various connections. We're willing to kind of trial just about anything. Yes, we reserve veto power. There's some things we've just shut down and said, not on our operation. But really, what we've been intentional about is to make sure that there is a verified, independent, validated third party involved. Because if you're selling even any one of these irrigation products, you're going to say mine's the best and I can beat the competitors. If you're selling a biological, if you're selling a new nutrient management type plan, you can say, hey, this is guaranteed to increase your production, your profitability, whatever it is. We've really tried to team up with those independent third parties, whether it's K-State and Research and Extension, whether it's KGS over at KU. We hire a third-party crop consultant, a certified agronomist. We've got a lot of other additional eyes on the operation to say, hey, you tried this. This in fact worked. This didn't. Was it because of the climatic factors? You were too dry. You didn't have runoff from the paired watershed. You didn't have X, Y, Z. But I think it's really important to make sure that I think to your point, where do we get tried and true validization when we're trialing these products? And that's really why we've teamed up with a number of land grant institutions. I mentioned KU, obviously K-State, but we've also had some research and made some contacts with folks down at Oklahoma State. This NASA group, they've got folks from University of Maryland, Cal Davis, I think Texas A&M, maybe a handful of others. So there really is a lot of additional outside eyes, whether we like it and we're ready for that or not. But I think that's very important to make sure that the proof is in the pudding, so to speak.
Great. I want to be conscientious of everyone's time. We have hit 1 o'clock. We do have a hand raised and a couple questions in the chat. Ryan, are you able to stay and answer those for a few more minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay. And as a reminder to everyone else, if you need to get to another call or your lunch break's over, we are recording, so you can catch any of this if you need to drop off. But we'll go ahead and give you an opportunity to answer these questions, and then we'll get to that hand raised in just a moment. So if you can see in the Q&A, there's a question asked of, does the 360 rain system's weight itself pose compaction challenges?
It does. And that's something that, trial and error. Our first growing season with the 360 was in 2024. Some operator errors, just, learning a new system. But yeah, you want to make sure. I did learn if there's rainfall anywhere in the vicinity or a high likelihood, be sure to shut it off. It doesn't necessarily get stuck. It just, and I think I showed on the GPS coordinate on the planter, it has the same thing on the actual unit. So as it traverses down the tram line, it knows that it's actually where it's supposed to be and not on top of a row. Well, all of a sudden you get a little rainfall event, or maybe you've overwatered. Again, going back to that terrace channel, I don't want to collect water down there that I don't have to. Rather than getting stuck, it just gets out of whack. It gets out of kilter. So it sends the alarm signal that you're no longer going due north and south. You're not at 0 or 360 degrees. You're at 3 degrees, or whatever it may be, and it shuts the system off. So learned that the hard way after I mudded or rutted up that particular part of the field. Dad or I had to be there physically every single pass after that to manually walk the unit through the ruts where it wasn't going to go otherwise. So compaction's an issue. That is, again, one of the concerns that I have when you have 3,000 foot of hose and you're filling it full of water. There is a tremendous weight there. So I got to be intentional about that. Hopefully that answers the question.
Sure. Let's see. The other question we have in here is, do you fight any animal damage problems with the drip line off the center pivot?
Yes. It in our part of the world, and I think it largely goes back to that Crete silt loam, and you get down to a certain depth and it just has a higher clay content. I've heard horror stories from other drip tapes that are in really sandy type soil, and they may have gophers or they have groundhogs or they just have voles, whatever it may be. You can do a lot of damage with animals under that type of situation. Where we're at is typically field mice. So again, using good resources, being a good steward of all the resources. I want to make sure that I've got the predatory animals that like to go after the pack rats and the field mice and everything else. We have pushed dimate through the tape to kind of winterize it when we're done with the season. That seems to repel some of that. But I think when you install subsurface drip, one of the things that I've noticed, it really is the first maybe 1 to 3 years after the installation, where again, that ripper line or that shank line of the installation, that soil may not have healed up enough. So there is more of an open trench or open space that the field mice can burrow down and do their damage. Once the soil is kind of healed back up, certainly 5+ years into it, yes, you'll have the occasional hole, whatever happens, and you have to go fix that leak. A lot of times when I say, hey, on a center pivot, you have flat tires, you have gearboxes that go out, you have a boot that leaks, you have nozzles that plug up or a drop line that falls off. There's always going to be a management shortcoming or challenge on any irrigation delivery system. Same thing on subsurface drip. On 650 acres of drip, we probably do have to fix 20 to 30 leaks or areas in the field that we didn't know that was an issue until you go out to harvest or you fire it up to winterize. I like to joke, I go to every Home Depot and Lowe's and everything else at about now at the end of the snow season, and I want to buy the 72-inch driveway reflector markers because that's what I put on the four-wheeler, the side-by-side, and then wrap some tape onto it, survey tape, and then I stake it in the ground where I find a leak, and then go back when I have time to actually go repair that. So that's kind of how we do it. But yeah, there's always going to be a leak or two you gotta fix annually.
How about animal damage with the drop lines then off the center pivots?
Yeah, the precision mobile, that was a fun one. The first winter we went ahead and actually hung all those back on the truss spans of the pivot. That's a lot of work. I think my shoulder and my arm still are sore from doing that, putting it up and taking it back down. We only did that one winter and we're like, well, we're not going to do that again. The interesting thing that we noticed with the precision mobile drip, again, going back to a dry year where there was very little surface water in the local area, we did notice some sort of critter. I don't know if it was a possum, a skunk, a badger. I don't know what it was, but what they actually like to do is when the pivot was irrigating, they would go gnaw and essentially chew into the emitter line that was dragging along. I think they were just so thirsty. It was a source of water that then they found it, and it was the mother lode, so to speak. So on a full quarter-mile span of that precision mobile, I think over our 6 or 7 growing seasons now, we've probably had to fix maybe a dozen of those where there's just some critter that goes and pokes their teeth through it. Sometimes it's a fairly sizable leak. Other times they've completely just cut that tape or that emitter hose completely in half. So I have to take the pocket knife and cut the rough edges off and put a plug on it, and away we go again. But again, I think that's the other thing. Being a good steward, I don't mind that kind of wildlife because I just know that the Lord's put them on here, so they're trying to do what they're going to. So if I've got abundant wildlife, yeah, skunks and raccoons and everything, they're hopefully taking care of some of the bug issue. But we've seen a real, I don't know, recovery, but we've seen a real abundance of pheasants the last year or two. The quail population seems to be coming back. I'm not a deer hunter or turkey hunter, but have some neighbors that really like to come down to some of our more wooded and timberlands and certainly along the creek. So wildlife isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No, not at all. Okay, we do have one hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself, Aaron, and you can ask that question.
Yeah, thank you for all you're doing for sure. This was a great webinar here. But so I just had a question going back to the cover crops. I was just kind of curious if there was any data associated, I mean, mainly with carbon sequestration, but just with the cover crops and just the inputs.
Great question, Aaron. And yeah, data's out there. Liars use statistics and statistics lie. Um, Again, I think it is so weather dependent. And one of the things, again, being predominantly irrigated, we do not want to use our limited allocation on irrigation water. We do not irrigate cover crops. We save the irrigation water for our true cash crops. So, for example, there's been a couple of years we put the cover crop out and it just hasn't germinated. And we've tried the interseeding with the Montag, Hagee, what comes back to us that tends to work is you just drill your cover crop in. And it seems like where all else fails, whether it's wet or it's dry, you get an early freeze. The rye tends to be the best cover crop year over year for us. So that's kind of what we've stuck with. We put radishes, we put winter peas, turnips, put some clover out. So a lot of diversity there. I don't know if I'm ready to say the cover crop is the reason behind it. But again, using the management tools, we try to grid sample our entire operation every 4 years. So every year we're doing about a 25% allocation of the operation on a grid sample on 2.5 acres. I've got some grid sample data that goes back 20 years now, and it does seem very, very similar to some of the tree, cover we talk about. It sleeps, it creeps, it leaps. I don't know if that's what I'm ready to say, but it does seem like the last few years that we've been soil sampling, we've seen some pretty impressive increases in our soil organic matter. I don't want to, it's nothing to brag about because I'd still like to push it farther, but high threes, low fours seems to be kind of where we're at. I don't know if that's a plateau. I don't know, if I've got to really be intentional for cover crops to get it much above that 4%. But I think the second half of your question, the thing that really excites us about cover crops is the weed suppression. I still have not figured out how to do a cover crop before corn. And I showed that one picture of the corn that emerged year in and year out. I still think cover crops in front of corn for us tends to be a yield drag, but we have noticed at least stable or consistent yields on soybeans. But one of the things that we've really noticed on soybeans with the cover crop before it is weed suppression. Sometimes we've eliminated a complete herbicide pass. Other times we're making that management decision. Do we terminate the cover crop because it's a droughty spring and we want that soil profile, water, moisture to actually germinate the soybeans? So we'll actually terminate the cover crop this time, early March. There have been a season or two where we've had good rainfall. So we planted green and then terminated after the fact, whether that eliminates a post-emerge application or not. But excited about cover crops, particularly when it pertains to weed suppression.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know you had mentioned, sorry, I know you had mentioned just all the universities that you're working with. And I was just kind of curious, is there any research going on here local with any biochars?
There is, well, I don't know if there's research. We have been approached by a couple of folks on the biochar side that want to investigate, see if we're interested. Like I said, we reserve veto power, but I think the biochar conversation is something worth considering and having. And we do have some contacts at the various land grant institutions that I think if they can find funding, if they can find the resources, the time, the grad student, postdoc, they may be wanting to engage in that. So. Great question, but I think biochar is something at least worth having the conversation on.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you. With it, I'm gonna go ahead and end us for today. I'll let Joanna finish up since we're pushing, I said, quite a ways over our 1 hour spot. But I appreciate all of the questions and input. As we said, we'll have this shared and the recording put out there for rewatching and checking in. Like I said, Joanna, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our next month's call. And Ryan, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, so next month, March 26th, we are going to have Ryan O'Neill talking with us. He is going to be talking to us about practical ag tech on your operation. So that should be really interesting. And then we also have Rob Myers is scheduled for April 30th. And so we have a couple of months that are going to be really interesting. So make sure to join us next month.